Hello, everyone. I'm meteorologist Sean Sublett, and welcome to Across the Sky, our national Lee Enterprises weather podcast. Lee Enterprises has print and digital news operations in 77 locations across the country, including at my home base in Richmond, Virginia. For our podcast this week, we want to share with you our very special visit with the folks at WeatherBrains, a long-running weather podcast based in Birmingham, Alabama. My co-hosts, Kirsten Lang in Tulsa and Joe Martucci in Atlantic City, join me to talk with the Alabama team about how we got into weather. Now, Matt Holliner, who covers us from Chicago, had to be away this week, basically doing his day job live streaming severe storms in the Midwest. We pick it up with Bill Murray, the podcast host, talking to Kirsten about her non-traditional path to meteorology.
Kirsten, you didn't start out in meteorology. You started out pre-med, right?
Oh, did I say that? Yeah, I just started out my freshman year. Yes, I did at Baylor because they didn't have a meteorology program. I enjoyed it, and I was shadowed someone in high school, Jennifer Broom. Actually, I don't know if you know who she is. Great lady. I shadowed her in San Antonio when I was in high school. But then I went off to Baylor and they didn't have a meteorology program. And, you're like 18, 19 years old and you're like, I don't know what I want to do. So started off doing pre-med and then dropped it after my first semester. After my first biology class, I was like, I'm out. Yeah. And went on and did journalism and communications. And from there, I decided I wanted to, I knew I wanted to get, do the TV thing. And so I decided I wanted to get the meteorology degree. So started at Texas A&M for a year, but then transferred to San Antonio and went to Incarnate Word and studied under Alex Garcia at Incarnate Word and finished up my degree from there. And then Troy, you'll know these places. I worked in Victoria, Texas. That was my first job. I thought, man, I can't. That's the smallest of the small. You don't really get much smaller than that. So did Victoria, Texas, which was great, and then went on to Knoxville, Tennessee, Denver, Colorado, and then Tulsa, Oklahoma, and did TV actually at NBC, the one of the competitors with James, for about 5 years in Tulsa. Freelanced for a bit in Oklahoma City, and then did this job. So all over.
Yeah. That's a pretty cool transition to meteorology. Was there anything in your background that made you interested in weather that helped foster that, or what?
I think I'm one of the only meteorologists that will tell you there wasn't any kind of major event that made me want to be a meteorologist. It wasn't like
it makes you pretty unique, Kirsten.
Yeah, it does, I think, because most people, they've been through a terrible hurricane or some devastating tornado, and they thought, man, this is what I want to learn about. And in San Antonio, you don't really get much. You'll get, the remnants of a hurricane that come through. But honestly, Hurricane Harvey was probably the biggest thing that they've seen down there in South Texas at least in my lifespan. And that happened only 5 years ago? 5 years?
Yeah, 2017. We just gotten through the eclipse, and one of my hotels in Beeville, Texas, Metropolitan Victoria, was without a general manager, and the team was literally on the verge of walking out because this Category 4 hurricane cruising up in there, and they didn't know what to expect, so they dispatched me quickly over there to to calm down the ship, and so I arrived on that Thursday night, and just driving from San Antonio, watching these huge towers out over the Gulf, about 1 a.m. in the morning as I drove into Beeville was so awe-inspiring. But, we had to get everybody on board with the mission, hey, we're here to, give people a safe place to go. And, we made it fine through the hurricane. And the next day they were like, Mr. Murray, get out. And I'm like, why? They were like, we need your room. People need your room. I'm like, oh, great. So I drove to San Antonio, spent the night because I had been there in 1979, the International Science Fair, and had loved that Palacio del Rio Hilton. It was such a fine hotel, and it's still there. So I had to go spend the night there just to relive those old memories before I flew back to Birmingham. But yeah, Hurricane Harvey was quite an event. And of course, by that time, we were turning our attention to Houston. And, a forecast that had been on the table for about 24 hours that seemed improbable. But for some reason, I really thought it was going to come true. And unfortunately, it did. So, well, that's an interesting story. That's a good story, Kirsten, right there. Joe, talk to us about how you got into weather, because we always have to ask that. That's the obligatory question.
Hey, Joe, before you jump in, I want to nominate Kirsten a weather event in San Antonio. How about that AMS ice storm? When was that, back in the 90s? That would be a great one.
You want me to talk about the AMS ice storm? Oh my God!
No, that can be your big weather.
Oh, my next story. Oh yes, yeah. You know, I was born in '85, James.
Oh
so
boy,
I don't know that I remember that.
Yep. I remember it, James, and I couldn't believe it. I'm at San Antonio and the sun never came out for a week. It was so bizarre.
I'm presuming now is not a good time to say I was born in the 90s.
No, this is why you're going to teach me social media, Joe.
That's it. Barely made it though, that 91. So actually, like Kirsten, there's actually no one weather event that made me interested in the weather either. I will say one of the first things I can ever remember in my life, and I must have been 3 or 4 years old, was I was in my grandma's basement and Al Roker was on WNBC, so local New York NBC. And I remember you're like my grandma or my aunt saying like, look, Joe, it's going to be you when you get older. I remember thinking to myself like, yeah, it is going to be me. So like, I don't know, it's just something that's just with you or with me the whole time. But, growing up, I mean, I was born in 91. So I was, I remember some period of time before the internet, but admittedly not a lot. But I will say the first website I went on was weather.com in like 1999 or 1998. And I used to track hurricanes. I used to draw like the coast of Africa and Europe and the Caribbean islands. And I used to like plot my own hurricanes, like pretend there was a hurricane coming to New Jersey, because at that time there was really nothing that came there. I went to, so when I went to high school, actually, we had a meteorology class, which was great because I was like, this is going to be an easy A. I already know everything about the weather. But it was also bad because everyone knew that I liked the weather. So they wanted to cheat on me. So there was a little bit of back and forth in that. But it was good. But I ended up going to Rutgers University right here in New Jersey. Got my degree in meteorology there, was involved in our student broadcasting program, was actually the student manager of it. We had about 45 people by the time I left. And actually, speaking of Max, when we were also doing PowerPoint there, and then my senior year, one of the faculty, me and 2 other people, we asked for Max. We made a proposal and they got Max. I never got to see it though. I was gone by the time it was in there, but ended up after college working, it was like a temp to hire position at a local TV station, WM Mountain Broadcasting Company, BC, which is in the northern part of New Jersey. No weather, just reporting. That was for about a month. Didn't work out. We kind of mutually parted ways, and all good. And then I actually started my first job was in weather consulting. I worked as a meteorologist for a company called WeatherWorks, which is based in the northwest corner of the state, working heavily in the snow and ice industry. We had clients like Wawa, which is the big convenience store chain around these parts, which I think is going into Alabama now. We had the New York Jets, the Philly Eagles, MetLife Stadium, so it was a mix of clients, and really you'll learn a lot of weather there, because there it matters if it's drizzling, if we're accumulating rain, or if there's no rain for weather operations. So I learned a lot and learned how to really keep an eye on weather. A big part of it was calling people an hour before snow would accumulate. So you have to think about that. Hey, not only is it going to snow, but when is it going to start accumulating snow, and talk to them about that. Worked also in radio and sales and social media for there. That was my first job. My second job has been the Press of Atlantic City. So, I transitioned from consulting primarily into media, and I've been here since. I do some side work as well for another news station outside of where we cover. But, it's really been great being here at the Press of Atlantic City. And they were willing to take a chance on me, who had really, besides some radio experience, no formal media background. So I'm really thankful to Chris Worrell down in Virginia for making that possible. She's now down in Virginia. She was our executive editor at the time, for taking a chance on me. And I made a promise, if I do this, I'd give it 110%, and hope I've been doing that ever since.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool story. You're the dean of the group, Sean. Tell us how you actually got into weather. I don't know that I've ever heard that story.
Well, I appreciate the title there. Joe really, I may be the dean, but Joe he really has more institutional knowledge of the organization. So I lean on Joe a lot as we try to put this thing together to understand where the pieces are going to fit. But yeah, I mean, I'm a Penn Stater. So I graduated in 91 when Joe was born. I then got my master's. I actually wrote code at Goddard Space Flight Center for like 8 months and got tired of that really fast. And then I did TV for 20 years down in Roanoke and Lynchburg. I mean, I got into weather. So I was the classical weather geek, watching the TV news in the 70s and 80s. Can't wait for the weather to get started. So, I asked Mom if I could get up from the table, go watch the weather segment at dinner, and begrudgingly, she finally got used to the idea of, you can go in and come back. So yeah, I mean, that's it for me, because growing up in Richmond, the 70s were actually kind of a cold decade, and we had a lot of snow here in the mid to late 70s. So you can go back and see pictures of me playing in the snow here in South Richmond. And I think 79 was one of the more classical storms we had here. So that and hurricanes and thunderstorms. I tell the story this way, is that when I was getting to my early teens, I was always interested in looking up at the sky. And I didn't know if I wanted to go into astronomy or if I wanted to go into meteorology. And at that age, and I'm a first generation college kid. My parents didn't go to college. So I didn't have any idea how I'd make any money being an astronomer. Just didn't think to ask, because there's no internet in 1983. So I figured, well, these people on TV obviously are making a living. Maybe I can do that. And frankly, that's kind of how it got started, to be honest. And it just kind of took off from there.
Troy, you want to jump in?
I was going to say something here, because Sean and I have known each other for a long time and go way back. And probably it's kind of a really quiet job. Sean has helped me so much. We both sit on the AMS CBM exam review committee. And it's not really, it's a public job. Everybody knows it exists. We have the exam, but we have a committee which kind of operates in the background, just watching the CBM exam. And I've always appreciated Sean's support and everything that he's given. And Sean, you're still on the committee for a couple more years. So,
yes, sir.
So hang in there, buddy.
And I
thank you so
Troy,
much for your service, the AMS.
And everything that you have done, Troy, through all the, through the ice and what you had to deal with the freeze there in South Texas, and appreciate you sticking to it and working through everything as well. But yeah, I got on the AMS board of broadcast meteorology in I guess the late 90s, early aughts. Shout out to Robin Reed, who is the legacy CBS weather anchor here. I mean, I literally asked him, what do I need to do to get involved? And we were competing stations at the time. And he's 10, 15 years older than me. And he said, this is what you need to do. I always like to pay it forward, because people looked at me and said, well, there's something in you that's worthwhile. So I try to pay it forward where I can.
Yeah. So talk for a minute about your time at Climate Central and what all was involved there.
Yeah. So I got out of the biz after about 20 years, wanted to make a little bit of a change, and went up to Princeton to work for about 6 years at Climate Central to learn a lot about climate science. Had a wonderful opportunity to meet a lot of scientists from across the country. And part of my job was kind of setting up some of the broadcast meteorologists with some of the tools that we had, mostly graphics, but some other interactives that we had on the website. So I had a chance to meet more meteorologists from across the country, lots of scientists from across the country. And it was a wonderful opportunity to do that and learn how to communicate complex topics in a way, the best you can, that's kind of non-invasive. You as Catherine Hayhill likes to say, you try to meet people where they are, see where you have common ground, common interests, and common goals. And that's how you kind of talk about a topic that, some people still don't want to talk about, and that's okay. But, you want to find a way to talk about it in a non-threatening manner, to talk about the seriousness of it without panicking people, because that's panicking people does no good. Then they just lock up, freeze, and nothing happens. So it's a challenge, and I learned a lot of strategies there. But in the end, I really missed being in the day-to-day weather, and I had the opportunity to come back. John Boyer, shout out to John Boyer, who kind of said, Sean, I'm leaving the Times-Dispatch. I think this would be a good fit for you. And he kind of started paving the way for this position here in Richmond. And he and Joe worked a lot before I came down there. But I mean, this is how I met Joe, working through Climate Central and the work we did with him at the Press of AC. So it was a great experience at Climate Central. I learned so much, but it is wonderful. It really is wonderful to be home.
But Sean and Kirsten and Joe and Matt, I'm excited for y'all in this, what you're doing, because I think it's so unique, and it's, 5, 6, and 10, 3 minutes, that sort of stuff. It'll take forever for James Spann and myself to get over that. But you're breaking down the barriers in this, the new ways to communicate. And so I envy all of you for what you're doing.
That was one of the great things, is because there was so much creative freedom. And look, we've got a little room to fail. If this doesn't work, let's try it this way. And that's the beautiful thing about the podcast. As y'all were saying before, we know how to do this. We're just going to do it. So, I watched y'all. Marshall Shepard does a fabulous job over there on Weather Geeks. So I'm like, I want to take a little bit of each of that and kind of merge it into something that's for broader audiences, maybe a little shorter than WeatherBrains, maybe a little longer than Weather Geeks, and try to build something that way.
Exactly what you mean by that, Sean. We hope.
Don't get Troy started here, Sean.
We'll be out by midnight. How about that? I mean, it's okay, James.
I'm on Eastern time. It's almost my bedtime.
You'll see the sun coming up soon, Sean.
But I think it's also interesting too. Something we hadn't really mentioned is taking this science that it is, which is so complicated. It's not an easy academic experience. Taking something that's so complicated and trying to bring it down to earth and get people done. And that's what Matthew and the whole gang at the Washington Post have done.
Oh, yeah.
What y'all are doing. And I'm excited about that, because I've been told before by a couple of people, mainly consultants, which we won't start into here in television stuff. But I've been told people are really not interested in a lot of the stuff that goes on in the background. But you know what? They are. They love the weather. And if you can take some time and do, like Kirsten is talking about, you can tell them something maybe they didn't understand. They can understand things. Let's not sell them short. And I think that is what I admire y'all so much for doing. And Matthew and everybody at the Capital Weather Gang and so forth.
I had Troy, a really long I'm sorry, Kirsten. Go ahead.
I said we're hiring, Troy. If you want to put your resume in.
I don't know.
We are hiring. We're hiring a fifth person for our Western properties.
Oh, really?
So then we'll be a team of 5. But I had a really nice conversation with Jason at the Capital Weather Gang before I started this. Not that we're going to be competing and not so much synergy, but it is a very similar position. Obviously, he has a little more resources there than I'm going to have in Richmond. But, they have been doing very good work, very strong work for a long time. So I try to learn or cobble together from other places that I see doing good work and try to lift up the enterprise from here.
Y'all talk about Matt for a second, because I thought it was interesting. He had some really high-powered internships coming through, because he learned under you, Troy, right, at UT.
I know of Matt very well. Very bright young man. So,
and then he went on to Mississippi State.
Right.
But I mean, he was doing internships at CNN, the Weather Channel, and places like that. How was he getting those internships, and what message do we need to send to our up and coming students of how important that is?
Part of it is, and this is what I tell my students that. And I've mentioned it on this show before. I've been in academia now. I would never have expected this to have been the case, but for 35 years now. And one of the most important things that I think we have to do in academia is get people beyond the campus, because university campuses are not the real world. They are not the real world, unless maybe you're going into academia or something. But most people are not. And, the thing I remember about Matt so much is that Matt went out there, and I tell students, go out there when you get in your sophomore and your junior year, get out there and find ways to get in the real world. Because guess what? You may find out, you get out there, you say, this sucks. I don't like this, and I'm going to turn, and people do that. That's just human nature. But I just remember Matt going out there and getting it done. just going out there and getting it done. He wasn't worried about. He was looking out for himself, and that's what I always admire so much about Matt.
You're talking, Troy, you're talking some about, having your students get out there. One thing that Baylor had that was, I thought, a great program that I actually did was called Baylor Communications in New York. And they also had one in LA that came up a little bit later. But the whole point of it was to go off to New York for a semester, find an internship out there somewhere.
Yep.
And half of your credits were from that internship. And then the other 6 credits were from classes that we took. But I did that my senior year, and I worked at Good Morning America, and it was the best thing that I could have done, just experience wise. So I agree with you. Those kids going through school just get, and the one thing I will say though, I think from when I've graduated to now, getting internships though is definitely harder. I mean, they had a lot of unpaid internships that were going around, and now it's a little few and far between where you actually have interest. At the Tulsa World, we had some over the summer, but man, at Channel 2 in Tulsa, we didn't have them very much for a long time, which is really a disservice to, and it's not just Channel 2, it's any of them. There were a lot. James, do you guys have interns?
Yeah, we've just started phasing this back in after COVID. Mm-hmm. So, and it's tough here because we don't have a meteorology school within 100 miles. OU is the closest. So, come be an intern here over the summer, which is so incredibly boring. So, Troy, Tulsa summer may not be quite as boring as Austin, but it's probably close.
Well, I tell you the things I've been to Tulsa. I never forget the one time, James, that we when was it, Span? AMS meeting on hydrometeorology in Tulsa. We go up there.
1983. 1983.
83. And the next week, Tulsa floods away. We haven't been invited back to Tulsa. They still don't want us to Tulsa anymore.
Never again. Never.
Never again. The huge floods.
Remnants of Hurricane Tico. Yeah.
But James, so many great things about Tulsa, though. Really is a great community.
When we come back, legendary Birmingham meteorologist James Spann talks about the good and the bad of social media weather with our Across the Sky team. We'll be right back after a quick break.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
Jupiter reaches opposition later this month, bringing it to its biggest and brightest. Look for it early this week, rising around 9 or 10 p.m. local. The rise time is going to shift earlier and earlier throughout the end of the month, when it will rise with the setting sun and be visible all night, much like the full moon. Also this week, look for that moon to slide between Saturn and Jupiter, with Saturn on top and Jupiter below. They'll get closer as the week wears on until Friday, September 9th, after sundown. The moon will be positioned between the two. Take a kid outside and show them. These close approaches make it really easy to identify the planets. Elsewhere in the sky, space weather has been ticking up a bit recently, with more minor and moderate geomagnetic storm watches and warnings being issued by NOAA's Space Weather Prediction Center. There's also been an increase in auroral activity that's sometimes extended further south into the upper Midwest. This is expected around this time of year, specifically around the equinoxes. Known as the Russell-McPherson effect, it's named for UCLA professors Christopher Russell and Robert McPherson. Aurora are produced by high-energy particles entering the upper atmosphere. They follow magnetic field lines along a torus or a donut shape that surrounds the Earth. The more energetic those particles, such as in a strong or severe geomagnetic storm, the deeper those particles make it into that donut, and the further south the aurora are visible. The weeks around the equinox are the best for aurora watching because the Earth's axis is nearly perpendicular to the solar wind flow, and that drives just a bit more of those particles into that donut. This is also the time of year when the cloud cover tends to be a little bit less in those upper latitudes, where the aurora are most often seen. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
And we're back with part 2 of our very special visit with the folks at WeatherBrains. In this segment, we start with James Spann, the veteran meteorologist at the ABC station in Alabama, to discuss the future of digital weather communications.
I think we all have to realize here that for all of us, traditional broadcasters, those of you that are doing it right, professionals, and I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing. A lot of the TikTokers and the YouTubers, their audience makes our audience just look small as a peanut. And they're becoming the dominant way that people are getting some of their weather information. I mean, some of these people are gathering millions and millions and millions of views on TikTok and YouTube. And quite frankly, a lot of that content is absolutely horrible. It's fear porn. And nobody wants to share or watch a video when the weather's calm. Weather's going to be fine. Nobody's going to watch that. But boy, major hurricane possibly affecting the central Gulf Coast in 15 days. Watch this video to find out exclusively right here. And I fight.
And we can't get the forecast right for tomorrow, so we know 15 days.
and you guys know the deal. And I fight. And so what I deal with every day, is it true? All these private messages, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. Is it true? 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 With screenshots of the TikTokers and the YouTubes that have been forecasting a major hurricane on the central Gulf Coast on Labor Day weekend. And there's no accountability. And what's strange, when this stuff doesn't happen, people just don't seem to care. They just follow them with this religious type of zeal, and they become their superheroes. And if you come up against them and even suggest that it's wrong doing fear porn and posting deterministic output at 384 hours, then you're horrible. You're mainstream media. You ought to be banned. You ought to be murdered. You ought to be taken out. It's rough out there. So
I want to ask Joe, though. I mean, because Joe's our TikToker, or knows more.
Hipster.
A little. But
I'm a '90s guy,
But he is, and so I kind of want to get, Joe, your view when you see this and see a 15-day GFS, which the model's been spinning up hurricanes for the last 3 months every day in the Gulf of Mexico. What's your thought on that? Because you're the younger generation.
I have a couple of thoughts. It's an influencer economy, meaning that people who are on social media can make money off of it. And if my job was based strictly off of social media, I probably would be doing the same thing, because you're not making money posting about, hey, it's going to be calm and sunny tomorrow. But you need those people who are going to say that, because you don't need, the people who are going to hype all the time. See, those same people that are hyping all the time also have a personality that people are attracted to. So, even if they know half in their mind, like, it's not going to be right, this bogus cane, I think Bill just said bogus cane, coming through. They just still want to be entertained.
Okay, but Joe, look, how as a meteorologist do you see that?
Well, so it's interesting, and I go back and forth with my head, because when I interned at News 12 New Jersey back in 2012, and I remember at that time, the thing was, don't talk about any of that stuff. Really, don't talk about it. Don't hype. And even when I first started WeatherWorks, don't hype. Well, I'll tell you what, I one of the meteorologists I know who's there, now is almost, tells me, your job is to say, hey, I know people are posting this, but this is why it's not right. And I morally struggle with that, because I agree. It's not like I agree with that premise, but then I also feel like there's going to be maybe, if there's 40 other people who never saw any of that 15-day hurricane, now you're posting something or talking about it. Well, now those people, smidge in their head, might say, you know what? I know he's saying it's not going to happen, but at least there's a chance, isn't there? And then people get all crazy.
Yeah.
I think the way, I don't know if I don't have a good answer for how to get past that. I mean, the one thing that Sean and I have worked heavily with now is working with some kind of seal with the AMS that might have to, deal with, that might elevate the people who are working in a digital space. But, I think we live, we are in a time, we're in an influencer economy, we're in a personality driven economy, and we're in a time where people want to believe what they want to believe because they can find enough information to satisfy what they want. So, I think that, I don't know if this is any different than what's happening in journalism nowadays. I just think it's extended over to the weather space. The difference, I guess you could say, is that weather is a science, so there's that. My thought is, the way my, I'll say, personality, social media style is to, let's have some fun about the things that are actually happening and going to happen, so like, small thing, right? Yesterday, Atlantic City International Airport broke their daily rainfall record. Well, I might drop a couple of goat emojis on there and be like, ACY now is the goat for, rainfall on Sunday. Like, why not have some fun that way, and talk about something that did happen rather than talk about something that we know 15 days out is more than likely not going to happen. I also will say too, and then I'll turn it over to Sean and Kirsten, but, specifically in this area, a lot of people know that the Euro got standing right 7 days ahead of time and the GFS didn't. And anytime, in this area, Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, there's posts about the Euro, people take that seriously. And when they see the GFS, they're like, well, what does the Euro say? So that's kind of a side thing, to the question, but I think it also kind of plays in the same space.
Yeah. And that's just kind of how complicated and complex we are as humans, because this anchoring bias that you're talking about, Joe, and with the Euro too, we just seek out things that are confirming what our first inclination is. So if we see this deterministic cane in the Gulf, we're clearly going to continue going back to that. It's just what human beings do. And I don't know how to change that.
Here's the deal. Look, I'm a big freedom of speech guy. I am. All these TikTokers and YouTube guys, I would fight for their right to post a 384-hour deterministic Category 5 hurricane. I would fight for their right to do that. However, if you scare my people, and by my people, I mean my local market, you're going to have to deal with me. And, Big Ed's extreme weather face bag page and Uncle Joe's, extreme, it's all extreme weather. Everything's extreme weather face bag page. You get it here exclusively. Don't listen to the mainstream media. You scare my people, you got to deal with me. These people have no voice. They don't know what to believe. It's this ocean of information. They don't know what's true, what's not true. They have no earthly idea. And if people are scaring my people, I'm going to have to stop it. And I've got a big megaphone. I can do that. But I just have great concern over where this is going in 10 years and 20 years from now. Where do professionals fit in? Do you have to be some TikTok, YouTube personality, where you're doing these cartoon fonts and you're doing these just outrageous forecasts that are, it's nonsense. There's got to be some way for professionals to keep doing their craft, present credible, level-headed information where people can make decisions on what they're going to do. People have stopped elective surgery because they saw some nitwit on Facebook posting a 384-hour hurricane map. They cancel vacations. They cancel family plans. And so I get really frustrated. And I sound like I'm cranky because I probably am, because I've been dealing with this over Labor Day weekend for the last 2 weeks. But I'm encouraged that I think all of you are professionals, you're level-headed, you're not going to do this, and you're going to do it in a way to create something new. And that's the other concern I have, is the next generation, that they want to do what I do. These Ron Burgundy newscasts, they're gone. Linear television, it's gone. Nobody's going to watch, something on CBS at 7:30 Central Time. The people don't do that anymore. And the news audiences are dwindling, and we got to reinvent this wheel. And I think part of what you're doing is part of that process. And I have firm belief that the next generation can do this, but we got to get to work on it. So anyway, I didn't mean to get cranky.
I echo that, really, James. That was part of the motivation for doing this, as that stuff is all exclusively online. And there do need to be more legit professionals doing online content to avoid all the scare tactics, right? Because we get them too. I haven't gotten them as much since I re-entered this sphere. And I do wonder if it's because I'm exclusively digital and not part of the dreaded mainstream media. Fair or not, that's been branded a certain way. Now, I do have a lot of interaction, especially when we get into wintertime. What about the Euro? What about this? And I will said, the ensembles don't support this solution. This is what the ensembles are about, and this is why I use them. Off we go to the next thing. And I'll give a 1 or 2 sentences. This is why I'm not buying this. This is why I'm not buying this. You can go where you want, but this is my opinion. And, despite the Ron Burgundy aspect, James, Joe, Kirsten, Jen, Troy, all of us who do media, weather, no matter what the venue, have to develop a personal brand. And what are you going to be known for? What are you going to be known for in the long haul? Right. So that's why I'm saying what we're doing now is very much in its infancy. And my hope is that we are developing something that in the long haul is going to build further credibility to online weather presence in rapidly changing and developing situations. It is going to be a long slog. But, back to your point about weather communications, who knows who Hank Green is? Does anybody here know who Hank Green is?
Is he a YouTuber?
Joe, you know. Martucci.
Hank Green?
Hank Green. Do you know
I
who
actually
Hank Green
don't know
is?
who that is.
All right, so Hank Green is this guy in Montana in his early 40s, all right? And he does science videos on TikTok, but he is legit. He is legit. My daughter, 23, said, Dad, you need to follow Hank Green. And I did. And I started watching, and he's very, ADHD, if you will. But he's just hitting scientific talk. And I watch him, and he's right. He's right. He does it in a very high energy way, but he's right. He's doing it in a very different way for a very different generation. And he's covering all science topics. I've watched him do weather videos. I'm like, son of a gun, he's doing it right. He hasn't said anything wrong. So I'm trying to, I got on TikTok. I'm mostly kind of absorbing what I see out there. Who's doing what looks bad, what looks okay, where's a place I don't want to put my feet. These kinds of things is very exploratory for me right now. All right. But I do think that's kind of the job right now is to somebody has to develop a legit online weather presence for real-time events, because there isn't a lot of that exclusively. I still love all my broadcast colleagues, but they're worn thin. Y'all know this. It's part of the reason I got out. All right. Because you got to do all these shows, and then you got to do OTT, and then you got to go do this, and then you got to do that. And it's burnout. And you can get burned out very easily. All right. So the opportunity to do a couple of shows when I want, they're 90 seconds, I drop them in, then I can go work on other things. It's great. But James, I absolutely hear your point, and I echo it. And that's what I'm hoping we can develop here, playing chess instead of checkers.
All right, Joe, go.
I just want to chime in I'll just say real quick, the one thing that we as in, everybody in this Zoom that, the internet or social media, meteorologists don't have is the ability for us to get out and go out in the communities every day. I don't see your internet, posting the guy who posts 384 hours out in the GFS. I don't see that same guy posting a picture of him at the local church, speaking to that group. I don't see them going out and doing, community work. I think and that's a similarity between what Sean, Kirsten, and I are doing, and Matt as well, with everyone who's working in television. We still, that's still a core part of what we're doing. And that, like anything, relationships are formed best when you're in person with each other and seeing each other. So, I make it a strong point to get out as much as possible and post about it as much as possible. People might think I'm just being, what's the word I'm looking for? Self-promotion, but it's really, self-promotion, but it's also to say, hey, we're here for you, and this is who I am. You don't see the social meteorologists doing that.
Yeah,
really.
I've said this before. I think to really, really be successful, you in a specific a local market, and I'm still a local market guy, and that's my core job here. You have to understand the people, the culture, the geography, and the microclimate of the market that you serve. And it takes some time to do that. You can't be some guy in Walla Walla that's decided he's going to start showing, maps 20 days out and the outrageous stuff. There's no credibility there, and I think that's still important, and that's a great point. I'd love to, and I'm in a school every day. Every single day. Sometimes 2 schools a day. My first open dates are in November of 2023. The demand has exploded. But on the way to these schools, I learn, even though I've been here forever, I still see things I've not seen before. When there are tornadoes flying, I can call out these places. I can see it in my mind. and there's no way a lot of the, TikTokers can do this. And I still think that's an important part of it. But again, we've got to reinvent this distribution model. I mean, you can get a gazillion eyeballs on these videos we do, but you got to monetize it and make money for our families. But anyway, having said that, Joe, I firmly believe in your generation. You're going to figure this out. It's going to be okay.
And James Spann also has been known to mention one or two very interesting establishments in central Alabama as well during that said severe weather coverage. Occasionally.
But, we talked about this. So you call out Wesley's booby trap. Everybody that lives in Bagley, Dora.
I had that on the
Bagley, Dora, Summerton, Sipsey, Empire.
Try that one, Joe.
They know where Wesley's booby trap is. I mean, that is the most famous landmark in that part of the world. And I didn't even think anything about it. I just call this stuff out. I mean, it's just you have to understand the culture.
You're the best
of the people where you serve. And again, that's why it's so hard to do this on a national platform. I admire Jim and Cantori and what they do at the Weather Channel, but man, it's hard to, I just still think there's going to be room for local people to do this. And again, something good's going to come out of it. I don't know what it is. So how many hours do all of you spend on social media, just out of curiosity? Run through a normal day. What's your day like? I love to ask this question because it is my biggest struggle is time management. It's not working for me. I'm sleeping 3 hours a night, which is not healthy. So go through a typical day.
I can start. My day is very broken. I have two small kiddos. One's 14 months and one is 3.5 years. And so I wake up in the morning sometimes at it depends, sometimes 4 a.m. if I'm working on a deadline because I have a story due. Otherwise, there's many times where I get to sleep in till 6:30 in the morning, which is huge because I did mornings for about 5 or 6 years. And so sleeping until 6:30 is a big deal. But for me, it's very broken. It's very much, I'll work 2 hours here. I'll take my kids to school. I'll come back and I'll work for about 3.5 hours, 4 hours here, go pick them up, come back and work another 2 hours. And then I'm still able to, put them to bed at night and get a full 7-8 hours of sleep, which, like I said, is just, it was one huge thing about this job. Now, this is all barring severe weather, right? Severe weather, all of that goes out the door and you're there whenever you need to be. But this is just a typical day. That was one thing that was really enticing about this job was the fact that I could make my own schedule whenever I wanted. So it really just depends. There's always the daily forecast that I'm recording, whether it's in front of the green screen, downtown offices, or like I said, sometimes I just do it here from the house and, sit in my kitchen and have the background. And it's kind of a picture-in-picture thing with OBS. And then, like I said, I have those two big columns that run each week. So my Tuesdays and my Fridays are a little bit more jam-packed. And then we have our podcast on Thursdays. So,
yeah.
And explain what OBS is for the people that don't use OBS.
No, it's a free software that I feel like I don't know the best way to describe it. I feel like it does everything. I mean, it's what I use to key out my green screen. But OBS is, I don't know, Sean or Joe, how do you explain OBS?
Go ahead,
video
John.
software.
You want me to take a crack at it?
Yeah.
It's a streaming platform. It's a streaming open. It's a freeware software, so it doesn't cost anything. But there's it's a way for you to for the people listening and watching. Think of your TV channel, right? You got a banner at the bottom showing the headlines. You got maybe the meteorologist on the big part of the screen, and you have a screen to the side with a looping radar or something like that. It allows you to create that kind of setup. So what all of us have is we have our box with our webcam, assuming we're working from home. Then we have our Max, which is our, the biggest box you'll see on the screen. And then we have an area for our social media, our weather sponsor, like seal or your name. So it's a way but it's a way to stream. It's a way to record, and it's a way to push a video to a large number of places if you are streaming. We do that in conjunction with some software that we have in-house that works with OBS natively.
And let me just say, I use an OBS type piece of software called Wirecast, which does the same thing. Yeah. It's kind of pricey, but it's for idiots like me because OBS requires a Joe kind of guy here, a hipster that's into all this stuff. Wirecast is more of an OBS for dummies.
You say I'm a hipster because I'm in New Jersey? Is that why?
Yeah, you're a hipster. I mean, you're a total hipster. I mean, anity with hair like that's a hipster hairstyle. Yeah. So anyway, but I just wanted to explain. And OBS is a great solution. And there's some young people that are, they're graduating. They have a degree in meteorology. They want to do what we've done, Sean, for years, and they have no interest in television, none. They don't see any relevance to their lives or their generation. And nobody wants to apply for these jobs anymore. And they want to do this on their own. And I would encourage them to do it on their own. But I'm just saying OBS is a great piece of software that doesn't cost anything. It's and that will get you into some really cool production stuff. I think it's great.
Yeah,
so
I've even
I just
been
wanted
able
to be sure that we explain what that is.
It can't be but so bad. I've learned it for the most part on my own with little help from Joe. And I've just I'm in my office in my home. I went out and bought a microphone, and it doesn't sound bad, right? It doesn't sound bad. But back to Kirsten's point, the hours are great. I mean, look, we've done TV. We know what TV hours are. The hours are amazing. I mean, they are. As Kirsten said, when the weather's rapidly changing, all bets are off. But when the weather's fairly quiet, it's 7:30 to 5. It's 8:30 to 6. It's this. I mean, come on. Never dreamed I'd have hours like this doing operational forecasting. But in terms of social media, it varies. When we know there's weather, there's weather coming. You do want to keep your community informed, and you'll do a couple hours in a day, right? But if the weather's quieter, you're not spending as much time as maybe 20 or 30 minutes, depending. So it varies a lot. But yeah, so much, especially in the winter and hurricanes. That was the one thing I noticed when I was doing TV and started social media. That's when the numbers spike. That's when people are interested. Snowstorms, hurricanes, boom, boom. What about this? What about this? What about this? And yeah, you can't, it's whack-a-mole on some level. So at some point you have to back off for your own sanity. But
right. And mental health is, we've talked about that a lot on this show. It's training when you're working, in my case, from 4 a.m. to midnight every day. And since the show started, I've probably answered 20 direct messages, and I've got 20 more that need a response. And you're constantly, every minute of every day, trying to respond. I respond to everybody, unless it's a major tornado outbreak or snowstorm, or I just can't do it. But in normal situations, I'll respond to these people. I'm honored they came to me. I really am. Out of all the weather people in the world, but it is wearing and could beat you down. And the other thing, it's the trolls. I don't know if you guys. I might be the only guy that deals with them. The haters and the trolls, and that's brutal, and that'll crawl up in your head, and it's especially bad for women. And we've talked about it. We did a show on this, Bill Murray. To this day, I'm still stunned over what I heard that night on that show, including one of my own employees here that works with me in this building. But anyway, so Joe, what's your day like, man? You're the last person that's yet to answer.
Yeah.
Joe.
So, I do try to give myself, let's say 6:30 to 9 a.m. just, no work stuff, just maybe answering a couple of emails. But, when I start, the one, besides catching up on email and getting back to a couple people on Slack, I kind of have a little meeting with myself and thinking and you're talking about social, what can I put out on social media today? What's relevant to the weather story? So for example, today, we're in a drought. We had a rainfall record yesterday, but that rainfall record was really over that one little spot. So we talked a little bit about drought. We talked about, a little bit of the rainfall. I posted out our podcast that came out. Today may not be the best example. Tomorrow we got rain coming, and then we have a really nice stretch with low dew points. So I want to make sure the content I'm putting out on social is relevant to the weather story today, while at the same time not giving away the 7-day forecast and not giving away, what is actually happening in those high impact weather events, because those are the things that people are going to want to come to our website for. So, I could say it's going to rain Tuesday night, but I'm not going to say when it's going to start or when it's going to stop. That I'll share you a link to a weather column that's going to show that. So, I have that discussion with myself. Then I'll usually start forecasting, around that same time, work on our weather column for the day. That goes in print and online, and then I'll work on our videos with Max. But my day is so varied. I mean, I have sales calls. I'm going out and doing events tomorrow. I'm going to interview someone for a story that we're working on about extreme tidal flooding across the Jersey Shore. It really can depend. I'm also our drone pilot for the company. So, last week I went down to Cape May and, took drone footage there. So it really does depend, James, on the day. But, the couple things, is definitely a part of that day is the weather column, is my 2 videos a day. I also do a boat and beach forecast during the summer into September. And then, also making sure on social, am I putting out stuff that's relevant? Now, what I will do as well with social, and again, this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, I want to make sure people know that I exist at almost all times, but I'm obviously not on at all times. I'll schedule stuff for weeks in advance. I got a story that I wrote that can live, for the season. Well, I'm going to share it out every Saturday between now and November. And, keep hitting that same base. Drone footage, going back drone footage is great for that. I mean, it's seasonal. People can see that. So, I would say if I'm home all day, I'm probably spending about 2 hours on social media. If I'm not home, it's going to be less, obviously. But that's more or less how my day is run.
Again, huge thanks to the team from WeatherBrains for inviting us and the great conversations that we had. In addition to Bill Murray and James Spann, we talked with Jen Naramore, James Adelot, and Troy Kimmel. Check out their podcast, WeatherBrains, for the full conversation. It went for a full 2 hours. We were having a good time, to be honest. And a very special thanks to Chris White, organizer of the Mid-Atlantic ChaserCon, for helping set things up with this special podcast. I'm meteorologist Sean Sublett from the Richmond Times-Dispatch, and we'll talk to you next week on the Across the Sky podcast.